Welcome to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy, and it's another NFL Division season preview edition of the show. And in this show, we're going to talk about the NFC North, top to bottom, in my opinion. It's right there with any division in this league entering the season as maybe the best division, the toughest division in the NFL. I think there is optimistic outlook and reason for an optimistic outlook for all four of the teams in the NFC North, and a great division to talk about here on this edition of the show, and a great person to help us talk about it. Philip Nelson, his favorite team resides in the NFC North, that being the Green Bay Packers. But we were talking before we started this show, Phil, that I know you watched a lot of the Packers preseason week 1 game. It was ugly. We can't sugarcoat it. And you expressed to me off air some real serious concerns for the Packers, and this might not just be a case of, well, just chalk it up to week 1 of the preseason, don't worry about it. No, you told me, be worried. There are some concerns here with the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, look, me being in training camps and at the collegiate level, pro level, whatever, I realize it's week 1 of the preseason, but look, starters played. And it just seemed like for a whole organizational issue, like just sloppy play all around. And that comes down to practice habits, muffed punts, penalties, holding, drop passes. I think in the first quarter there was 3, and that's something that has been addressed with the Packers all last year. They don't have a true number 1. And then all of a sudden you have all these drops. I realize my panic level isn't all the way up there quite yet. There's still, 2 more games left in the preseason, but I'm just saying from an organizational standpoint, practice habits, you can tell that there's just too much sloppy play for me. And that's a cause for concern.
Absolutely. If the bad habits, poor, what's that old saying? Yeah. Poor
practice habits.
Poor preparation or negates poor performance.
Yeah.
Or great performance. It's something like that. I screwed it up.
Yeah.
But, it's proper preparation prevents poor performance. There we go. That's the one. That's what I was thinking of. And you're right. If your preparation habits and your fundamentals are poor, how are you going to be able to execute at a high level on game day? So you're right. There's just some of the habits, and this is something that someone like Philip would notice. All your experience, playing at college, being at camps, CFL, NFL, the spring football leagues you participated in. It's just something that, as a former player, you get that sense that, hey, this team's muffin punts, too many false start penalties, too many holding penalties. Maybe they lack discipline, unnecessary roughness. They're doing something like that. Just the little things and the intangibles and the fundamentals. You're seeing things not being where they need to be based on what you saw out of the Packers last week.
Right. And what you really look for in the preseason, because everyone's being vanilla, right? Nobody is showing anything crazy. The craziest thing, you're seeing basic cover 2s, cover 3, maybe a little bit of man-to-man. But at the end of the day, you're just looking for a clean game. And what the Packers showed last week was not clean at all, just in terms of efficiency and just operations. That's the issue for me. If they lose a preseason game, it is what it is. But you just look for a clean game. Like I said, you look for discipline. You look to be able to execute. And I just wasn't seeing that. And, I watched the Packers closely last year, and there were times in the season where they didn't look like, they struggled with that. They struggled with consistency and efficiency. And I think moving forward here, they have to really clean it up this preseason. A lot of people on ESPN and all these talk shows, I hear them hyping up the Packers, but man, I think that first preseason game was a cause for pause on all that hype.
There you go. And it's like I said, it's a fine line we walk here in the month of August, Philip. Trying to don't get too excited about awesome preseason performances, and don't be too negative on horrific preseason performances. But I think what you're saying has merit to it.
Yeah.
Because fundamentals, if you lack those early in camp and in preseason, sometimes that can follow through into the regular season when the games count, no doubt. We're talking NFC North, Phil, and we will begin with the Chicago Bears. Of course, we always go in alphabetical order, and the Bears are looking to take the big step this season in the NFC North, and a lot of changes have been made, starting, of course, Ben Johnson, new head coach, just on, to me, one of the best head coaching hires this offseason, just because of how much respect I have garnered for Ben Johnson as an offensive coordinator with the Detroit Lions. And Philip, I'm sure you appreciate it as a player that was on the offensive side of the football as a quarterback in your career and playing background, that the creativity in Ben Johnson's offensive mind, different formations, end arounds, just doing, fake the handoff and then do a little screen, and just different type of things that kept defenses totally off balance. He was just a master of just scheming and calling plays that it seemed like most of the time his offense was in the right formation again, and the play call was the right play call against the way the defense on that other side was lined up. Just really, really impressive stuff from him. Now, as we've said on this show before for years, just because you're a great coordinator, it's not always going to make you a great head coach. But I am going to give Ben Johnson the benefit of the doubt, and I give all first-time head coaches in this league that obviously become head coaches from being great coordinators, I give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think, hey, you're going to do a good job until I see otherwise. And I think Ben Johnson is smart enough that I think he is ready for this opportunity, can be a great head coach. Caleb Williams, this is now a big year for him because I think we've cut him some slack, Phil, for the struggles. We've cut him some slack because of poor coaching. We've cut him some slack because of a horrendous offensive line, one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL that the Chicago Bears had last year, and not to mention an absolute numbnuts of a head coach, not just bad, horrific, in Matt Eberflus. This is an example of a coordinator not being a good head coach. Just inexcusable, unfathomable what we saw at the Thanksgiving game last year against the Detroit Lions with the screw-up of epic proportions with the clock right at the end, that they absolutely pissed that game away with just horrendous clock management. I still can't believe it, looking back on it. And that falls on...
He needed to play Madden.
Yeah. Philip Nelson's not making that mistake. He's going to make sure his coach screws in and calls a fucking timeout at that moment in the game. I'll tell you that right now. It was awful, and it pretty much sealed his fate, wasn't it? I think he was fired right after that game, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Like, that was it. And, like, it was just very poor. It felt like they weren't always well prepared. Adjustments in game weren't great. So Matt Eberflus loses his job, and now it's Ben Johnson's. So Caleb Williams, can he take that step? He's got the right offensive-minded head coach to help him. There's no doubt. I expect more creativity, better scheming, better game planning offensively from the Chicago Bears this year. But that can only take you so far, the scheming and the brain power of Ben Johnson. You need the personnel to be good. And the first thing the Bears had to do in the offseason was address the offensive line, and not just a little bit, by a lot. And I think they did a pretty good job of it, all things considered. They knew that offensive line was a liability. They knew they had to revamp it and improve it. And they go out, they bring in the veteran Joe Thuney from the Kansas City Chiefs. This guy's been a great offensive lineman for years in this league. Jonah Jackson also brought in. Drew Dahlman has become a really good center in the NFL last few years. So that is 3 big additions now to an offensive line that was flat out miserable last year for the Chicago Bears. And look, they used a second-round draft pick on Ozzie Trapillo. That should help for them as well. So they went draft to help that offensive line and get shored up as well, which is good to see. They're hoping that Braxton Jones, Darnell Wright can stay a little bit healthier, help that O-line as well. But the bottom line is Chicago's in better shape, with their much better. I mean, this is a position group that goes from one of the worst in the NFL. They're not one of the best in the NFL yet. They're still not, they haven't improved that much. But if you go from one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL to middle of the pack, which I think I think that's a reasonable assessment right now, Phil, that they can be a middle of the pack offensive line at least, then that's going to do wonders, I think, for Caleb Williams. But it's not just the O-line's got to be better and should be better as to if Chicago's offense being better. It falls on Caleb Williams too, because as bad as the O-line was, there were times it was not their fault, and there were times that Caleb Williams just holding on to that football just way too much at times last year. And you can make damn sure Ben Johnson, who's pretty smart, is aware of what Caleb Williams was doing there, holding on to the ball too much. That's why he took 68 sacks last year with the Chicago Bears. So obviously we'll look to fix that. There's no question about that. And when you look at the skill positions, there's a lot to like here for the Bears. If that O-line can protect better, open up holes for the run game, Caleb Williams gets over this phobia, if you will, of holding on to the football too long. You have a DeAndre Swift at running back. You have Rashawn Johnson to spell him. You've got a tremendous receiving core, in my opinion. DJ Moore, a second year now of Roma Dunze. And even with a horrific offensive line, we did see at times the flashes of chemistry between Caleb Williams and DJ Moore last year. I think Roma Dunze takes a step forward. Luther Burden was a monster receiver in Missouri in college football. I really like them picking him. If his college skills translate to the pros, he's going to be a really good receiver for them. They signed Olamide Zaccheaus in the offseason as well to provide a little bit of depth. They still have Cole Kmet at tight end, and then they added and drafted the Michigan tight end, Colston Loveland, as well, who's going to be a nice 1-2 tight end punch with Kmet now. So no shortage of weapons, and they got a good kicker. I like Cairo Santos. He's a very good kicker. So that the offense has the potential to be very solid here for Chicago with the brain power of Ben Johnson and with the fact that obviously the offensive line is significantly upgraded. So I have the arrow pointing up on the Chicago Bears offense for sure. But the good news is on defense, when you look at last year, there were times it was good. There were times it struggled. But there were times, too, that it kept them in games, when the offense was sputtering last year for the Chicago Bears. So while Chicago, rightfully so, devoted a lot of attention to the offensive line in the offseason, they also shored up the defense in a lot of areas. And that defense, even though it held them in the game at times, it kind of felt like they wore down late in the year. And they still gave up, bottom 5 in the NFL in yards per game allowed last year. So they still did have some issues on that side of the football. But I think when you look at it, they've got to shore up the pass rush. That's significant. Montez Sweat certainly, had a bit of a down year last year, but I think he might play better. But Deo Adeyingbo is definitely one of the big additions they made to really shore up the pass rush, get a little bit better. Grady Jarrett was brought in from the Atlanta Falcons. I do worry that he has shown little, wear on the tread on the tires, if you will. A little bit of decline the last few years he's been in Atlanta with the Falcons. But it doesn't hurt to bring in a veteran like that, and hopefully you can get another season or two, decent seasons at the very least, out of him, no question. Gervon Dexter had 5 sacks last year, so they're hoping that he can continue to get better as well. And they really like the potential of the rookie that they drafted in the second round, Shamar Turner, who could be someone that really helps out and maybe even starts on that D-line and helps that pass rush for the Chicago Bears from day one. I think when you look at it last year with the linebacking core, no changes really here. It's pretty much going to be TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds, your main 2 linebackers again. So they weren't phenomenal last year, but you're going to hope that, hey, these are 2 players that have been good in the past to really good in the past, and you hope that there's a little uptick in their play this year. And then in the secondary, there's not a whole lot of shifting that they did here. Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon are going to be back. Both of them were pretty solid. They're going to need a little bit better from Tyreek Stevenson, a guy that at times really got picked on last year. Isn't he the guy that got burned too on the Hail Mary?
Yeah,
that's it. And that's the guy that was looked like he had no clue what he was the one that was kind of showboating there too, and it ended up costing him on that Hail Mary victory from Jaden Daniels that burned this Chicago team. And it's one of the reasons why their season started to go sideways as it did. So he's going to have to step it up, be better. Look, to me, the arrow's pointing up on Chicago. There's no doubt, like I said, the special teams should be solid. Santos is one of the best kickers, and they have a last place schedule based on the fact they were a last place team in the NFC North last year, which means they get an easier schedule to navigate. They play the Giants, winnable, Raiders, winnable, Saints, winnable, Cowboys, winnable, Browns, winnable. Those are all winnable games for the Chicago Bears. Now, it's going to be tough as fuck with the games in their own division because they're going to see the Vikings, the Lions, and the Packers twice, but they're outside the NFC North division games are pretty manageable when you look at it. Now, they do have a couple tough games against non-NFC North teams, Eagles, Ravens, Steelers, Commanders, but it's a manageable schedule. I do expect improvement. I trust in this hire greatly for the Chicago Bears without question, because that's how much respect I have for Ben Johnson, and I'm excited to hear what Philip's thoughts are on Ben Johnson and the hire. But I'm going to go over 7.5 wins here on Chicago. I did bet it. I expect 8 and 9 from that. We're not asking Chicago to make the playoffs. That's the best thing about this bet. That might be just biting off a bit more than you can chew, but I expect improvement. I expect good preparation, unlike the Eberflus era with Ben Johnson, and I expect a big jump in this offense. And more importantly, from a Chicago Bears game totals perspective this year, Phil, I think we're going to make some money betting some Chicago games over the total. A better offensive mind, a better offensive play caller, preparation. I think a year better for Caleb Williams. I think they're going to, get this bad habit of holding on to the football too much. Just get it out of there. And, of course, a much upgraded offensive line. All of that should help Chicago put up more points this year. Defense, I think, is going to be a little bit better too, but I think there's going to be a bigger leap in the offense than the defense this year, and I think there'll be some value with overs in Chicago games this year. Philip, what do you think here for the Chicago Bears?
Yeah, you nailed it there with everything top down. But the one thing that I can add here, Ben Johnson, I mean, obviously a great hire. Everyone's excited to see what he does here. I actually saw this comment from Case Keenum, obviously veteran of the league for a long, long time. He said this is one of the hardest offenses that he's ever actually been in the NFL. So, and what they're doing right now, word on the street in training camp, is they are overloading Caleb Johnson with everything, seeing what he can retain and how he operates. And that's going to be the X factor, obviously. And we're going to get into this with some of the other teams in this division. But, Caleb Johnson cannot, he needs to eliminate this notion that he needs to be a superhero on every single play, because Ben Johnson, the reason why
Caleb Williams, you're calling him Caleb Johnson.
Sorry,
yeah,
Caleb
that's
Williams.
All right. I do that sometimes.
Caleb Williams.
I do want to point out too, I'm making it sound like Ben Johnson's the play caller. It's Declan Doyle's the offensive coordinator, but you need your head examined if you don't think Ben Johnson's going to have a huge fingerprints all over the offense. Yes.
He's going to definitely be involved, I would anticipate. But Jared Goff, I mean, the reason why he was so phenomenal last year in this offense is because he threw on time. He went through his reads and he threw the ball on time, and he knew where the ball needed to go. Now, Caleb Williams, on the other hand, he tends to lock onto a guy and then try to, move around and do all these different crazy things, which, obviously is a strength of his. But this is the NFL. This is year 2 for him. He needs to get the ball out on time. And that's also why, he had all these sacks. And, I think that's going to be a huge thing here. And now, along with that, obviously, you mentioned it already, the offensive line last year was terrible at times. But I really do think with, the additions that they made this year, Joe Thuney, Jonah Jackson, and then also, they already had a great tackle duo in Darnell Wright and Braxton Jones. I think that, it's going to really come down to Caleb Williams here, being able to operate within this offense. And, I think it was, I know that publicly the Bears took a little bit of heat for not playing him in that first game. Obviously, he's going to play in the second one. But I'm once again, just like the Packers, I'm looking for a clean game from him. I'm looking for him to get the ball out, check it down when he needs to, and be comfortable under center. That's the other thing. Caleb Johnson is a shotgun guy, dating back to his
Caleb Williams. It's funny. You're making me think that you're talking about the linebacker for the Falcons. There's a Caleb Johnson that's linebacker for the Falcons.
Williams, he's going to be under center a lot. And, I think that's going to be, that's a skill that a quarterback needs to learn to play under center. So, I think that's going to be a huge X factor here for this offense. But the good news is with the additions of the offensive line, hopefully that they can create a little bit more of a running game to take some of the pressure off him. And now, DeAndre Swift, is reuniting now with Ben Johnson. So it's going to be really interesting to see if they can kind of get a run game going here. So I think that and that's the beauty of these shows at the beginning of the season, right? We don't really know what's going to be happening here, but to your point, I think I think the only direction for this team is up. And 7.5 wins, I think, is definitely doable. I have them going over as well. But once again, tough division. Obviously last year, the only reason why the Packers beat them in that one was because of the blocked field goal. So I think that they're going to be a competitive team. This defense is going to be great. I see that Jalen Johnson's out. He has an injury, so hopefully he's back for game one. But man, their week one matchup versus the Vikings is going to be a really, really interesting one. So I think that this team has a lot of upside here. I'm really excited to see Colston Loveland too play in this offense. I think that Ben Johnson really likes to utilize his tight ends, and you saw that last year with the Lions. And so Cole Kmet was great. I think that they're going to get into some more 2 tight end sets. And this team, it's an X factor though with Caleb Williams. I really think that he just needs to play, within the system, and this team should be able to. If he does, I think that they can win 8 games.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. And I've gone a step further. There's a couple other bets I wanted to mention regarding the Bears too. I mentioned in the AFC East preview with Liam Howe. Make sure you check that one out. We recorded it earlier this week. That I like Mike Vrabel as coach of the year for New England. Worth a shot for him to be coach of the year. I'm taking a shot with Ben Johnson. Same market here, because again, you want to target those coaches that are going to take most improved team. Usually the coach of the most improved team or one of the most improved teams from one year to the next wins that award. Right. And when I'm looking at it, there is a very good chance it could go to a Ben Johnson here for the Chicago Bears if they improve the leaps and bounds that I think, not that they will, but they definitely could. So plus 700 Chicago, Ben Johnson, coach of the year, I think was worth a look. And I did a sprinkle on, do I expect him to win MVP, NFL regular season MVP? No, obviously Josh Allen won it last year, but at 38 to 1, I had to sprinkle a little on Caleb Williams. Just a little bit. 38 to 1. Plus 38 on. What if he goes off this year? O-line's great, or at least a lot better. He's got the weapons. He's got the coaching staff and the brilliant offensive minds now led by Ben Johnson. He could go off. I don't think it's crazy. I think there's a better chance of it happening than the price that's attached to it at 38 to 1 plus 3,800. So yeah. I think it's worth a shot, at that price for a little Caleb Williams MVP action there. All right, the Detroit Lions, the defending NFC North division champions. And we talk about how it can only go up for the Chicago Bears after last year. Probably could only go down for the Detroit Lions. I mean, 15-2. Can you do any better than that this year in the regular season? Look, we'll just cut to the chase and get right to it, what the biggest concerns are. That as great as we love Dan Campbell and all the rah-rah speeches, and he's a great listen on the television in a halftime interview. I mean, he's as good as it gets. He's a great leader. He just ratchets up emotion and passion and energy from his football team, and they respond to it. But you can't deny that a big part of his success as a coach was the success of his coaching staff around him. And you've lost not just 2 good, but 2 great coordinator, especially in the case of the man we just talked about, Ben Johnson, and what a job he did as offensive coordinator. You lose your OC and you lose your defensive coordinator, who was also hired as a head coach in the offseason, Aaron Glenn, who is now the head coach of the New York Jets. So that's 2 new coordinators. John Morton takes over as the offensive coordinator. He was a passing game coordinator for the last season under Sean Payton in Denver. He will take over as OC. Kelvin Shepard, it's just basically him being promoted from linebacker coach to defensive coordinator here with Detroit. So they hired in-house as far as the DC. Kelvin Shepard taking over as the defensive coordinator. The brain drain, right? That's a concern here, that you lose both of your coordinators that were not just good, but they were great, especially in the case of Ben Johnson. How does it impact this team on both sides of the football? Yeah, they still got Jared Goff. Very, very good season. Didn't play his best in the playoff loss to Washington, admittedly. He was outplayed by the rookie. Let's call it like we see it. Jared Goff was outplayed by Jaden Daniels. Now, that's not the only reason they lost. Detroit's defense was hideous. You can't blame that on Goff. But, there has been some history of Goff, at times being inconsistent in the playoffs. I don't know if we expected him to lose at home to Washington last year, but the fact remains it happened. That being said, there's still all the weapons are still here. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, who got it rolling late in the year, a great tight end in Sam Laporta, and certainly the dual running back tandem that really showed that thunder and lightning capability to it, and Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery last year. I thought they worked really well as a tandem. You got all that, but you also had an elite offensive line to go with all that great skill position talent, didn't you, last year, Phil? You had that with Detroit, and that's where there's some questions now. That offensive line, there's been some concerning developments with the O-line, which has been elite. No question about it. Absolutely elite the last couple of seasons. One of the best offensive lines in the NFL. And to be honest, they're still fine at tackle. They still have Penei Sewell, who's terrific, Taylor Decker, who's equally just as good. I mean, they're fine in the tackle spots, but that interior got hit hard. And there's some real question marks about the interior of that elite Detroit offensive line that we've seen the last few years. Frank Ragnow has been one of the best centers in the NFL for the last few years and just suddenly announces his retirement in the offseason. And that was unexpected. Not a lot of people saw that coming. And then they lost Kevin Zeitler to free agency. So all of a sudden that interior that had Zeitler and Ragnow, well, all of a sudden you're plugging in, a second-round rookie all of a sudden might have to get the start. Graham Glasnow is probably going to have to see time there on that offensive line in the interior. And these are downgrades, period. That's all you can say, unless they prove it otherwise. And even then, I don't know if they're going to match what Zeitler and Ragnow brought you, in the interior of that O-line. So by default, you got to downgrade Detroit's offensive line a little bit. And we know that if Goff's not getting protected nearly as well as he was before, that's sometimes when more mistakes can creep up. So with the loss of Johnson and a declined, or at least a downgraded offensive line, especially the interior, you got to, slightly downgrade the Detroit offense, I think, coming into the season. And then on the defensive side of the football, they started the year strong, but then injuries mounted, and Aiden Hutchinson's injury was the game changer. He had that back injury, he had that injury, obviously, in the middle of the season. He was lost for the year. And then all of us, they had to scramble and acquire Zadarius Smith, to try to help that pass rush. You lost all that, pass rush and sack production that Hutchinson gave you. He was on pace, by the way, for like almost 25 sacks. How sick a season it would have been for him, probably, if he had stayed healthy. But he is back. That's the good news. He's back. He's healthy. He's ready to rock here this season for the Detroit Lions, which is desperately needed. There's no doubt. They got Marcus Davenport as the other edge. It's not what he once was, but like I said, we'll have to wait and see. But they need those guys healthy because, it's Alim McNeil suffered, in the playoffs, an injury. That was a concern as well. When you look at also what they've got there, they used a first-round pick, too, on Tyleik Williams to try to help that group. Jack Campbell, of course, is still on that defense, and was really, really good for them last year. The linebacking core also got hit with injuries. Alex Anzalone, the veteran, missed a lot of games. And then they had Derek Barnes and Malcolm Rodriguez miss games for them. I mean, they were just they lost their best pass rusher. The linebacking core was ripped by injuries. And of course, missing the end of the season was Carlton Davis too for this Detroit Lions team, who of course is now elsewhere. So when you look at that secondary as well, they signed DJ Reed, not a great year last year with the New York Jets, but how many times have we said this on this fucking show? When you go to the New York Jets, you suck. When you get out of there, you can play good again, and you can find your ability again. So maybe that's going to happen with DJ Reed here in Detroit, and he'll probably pair with Terrion Arnold, who definitely rebounded. I thought he had a tough rookie year, but he was a lot better last year in that secondary for the Detroit Lions. Amik Robertson's going to be there, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes. Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, stayed healthy last year, pretty good at the safety spot. So I think the secondary is still in decent shape, especially if Reed can bounce back, have a better year. The linebacking core you hope stays healthier. And Hutchinson and Davenport, if they stay healthy, the defense actually still could be pretty good with better health. But I wonder about that offense more so than anything, because the O-line was a huge component of the success, and it's definitely weaker. And then another thing you've got to factor in for Detroit that's going to make it hard, obviously, certainly hard to duplicate 15-2 again, is the schedule. It is a tough one, because you've got the two games against the Bears, Vikings, and Packers in the division, and then you got the Ravens, the Bengals, the Chiefs. You've got the Eagles, the Rams, and the Steelers.
And the Buccaneers.
Schedule. And the Buccaneers is a very, very daunting schedule. Huge, huge strength of schedule difficulty upgrade this year for the Detroit Lions. I took them under 10.5. I just think there's just a few too many warning signs showing through, at least to me, Philip, that it's going to be hard for Detroit to duplicate. And Detroit could take that approach this year. We went all out, won the NFC North, number 1 seed, home field advantage throughout the NFC, only to get bounced by Washington. We're not going to put ourselves through the ringer. And in a season where we had a shit ton of injuries too, we're not going to put ourselves through the ringer gunning for if we win the division, great. If we get the number 1 seed, great. Let's just get into the playoffs. If we're a 10-7 team instead of a 15-2 team, so be it. Just get in, and we'll look to play our best football in the playoffs this year. And maybe not, so much focused on, let's get that 1 seed, let's get that NFC North. And even if they do think that, I'm not sure they have the team to achieve that goal once again this year. Philip, what do you think here for the Detroit Lions?
Yeah, again, you nailed it. One thing that I've heard rumblings on is, coming out of training camp, which I will say I don't place a ton of merit in training camp rumblings at this point, because you don't know from an outsider perspective what's actually going on. But I've heard actually that the offense has been struggling a little bit under Morton. So it has not been the same is what I've been hearing. And
you mean John Morton, maybe Ben Johnson?
Yeah, it might not be. But hey, I mean, there's a reason for that.
And this is not to slam John Morton. This is just how great, not good, great Ben Johnson was. Yeah,
exactly. And I think, when you lose Ragnow and some of these guys on the offensive line, that was the strength of this team last year, was that offensive line. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I'm a quarterback's boy. I appreciate what Jared Goff did last year, but he's the type of guy that, when you put the right tools around him, he can play very well. Now, when you don't have that same offensive line and that same run game, and Ben Johnson calling the plays, you're right. I think that, it's going to be very, very difficult to duplicate what they did last year, especially with this the schedule. So I anticipate a decline in this offense for sure. They're still explosive as hell. Don't get me wrong. They got some great playmakers, a lot of speed on that offense. Once again, it's going to be really interesting to see how these first 3 games of the season go, Packers, Bears, Ravens. It's going to be really interesting to see. Now, you already kind of mentioned this a little bit, but once Aiden Hutchinson was gone, I mean, that pass rush was depleted completely. And obviously Aiden Hutchinson, I think he's going to be comeback player of the year, no doubt. But they just have a pass rush depth issue. I think that's a big thing in the league, nowadays is being able to get to the quarterback. And so teams are going to key on Aiden Hutchinson for sure. I mean, especially how the way that he started off the year last year. So, it's going to be one of those things, almost like an Aaron Donald meme where you see 4 guys all blocking him, So I think that Aiden Hutchinson is going to be a key here. Guys aren't going to let Aiden Hutchinson get to the field, get to the back, get to the quarterback and completely blow up the play. So I think that's going to be a difficult thing for the Lions to overcome. Now, obviously, they got Tate Ratledge, coming in, and he's going to be thrown into the fire early this year. So we'll have to see how he performs. But I think just one basic thing with this team is just it's not the same offensive line, and that was the motor that drove the engine last year. I 10.5. I agree with you, Ian. I think this is going to be a 10-win team or less. So I would go under as well. I think the schedule is too difficult. I think it's not the same team, not the same play caller. You lose your D coordinator as well. There's a lot of question marks here on this team right now. And so with that being said, I think that this is probably you nailed it in my opinion as well. I think this is a team that makes the playoffs. And could potentially make a run then, but I don't think this is going to be a dominant regular season team like we saw last year.
And it's not just that we think Detroit's, taking a step back. I think defense could actually still be. Could they be an under team this year with their game totals? Because the offense steps back a bit. But I think if the defense with Hutchinson there, and I think the secondary, they made some nice moves. The linebacking core, like I said, with Jack Campbell and company, are really solid for the Lions. That could still be a really good defense.
Right.
DJ Reed was brought in. Yeah, Jack Campbell and Anzalone and Rodriguez and Barnes. They got a good linebacker over there. It'll still be a really good defense, but the offense steps back, and maybe the game totals for Detroit may be prone to go a little bit more to the under this year.
Right. And I cannot stress enough, being a quarterback myself. Sorry, I keep saying that, but Frank Ragnow.
No, you can. Hey, promote that. I was a quarterback.
As a quarterback, when your best guy on the line is the center, that's huge. And I mean, he's the interior guy. He makes the calls. He helps you with calls and all that stuff. And I'm telling you, I think that Goff, he's a guy too where when he saw pressure, we've seen over the course of his career when Goff gets pressure in his face, he does not play the same. So I think that's another thing to watch here. I don't think that this is going to be as explosive downfield as a team, because if they cannot protect him and make those passing lanes, that's going to be a factor in this offense as well. So not to even mention the run game, because the run game was huge for them last year. So I think that this offense taking a step backwards. But you're right. I think, with the offense taking a step backwards from last year, which I think is just inevitable with how good they played, and then getting Aiden Hutchinson back, this might be an under team. So that's an interesting thought.
All right, it's that time, Philip. Your Green Bay Packers next up. Here we go. This should be fun. Philip's a Green Bay Packers fan, so I'm sure we're going to get some great hot takes here involving his Green Bay Packers, who were 11-6 last year, one and done in the playoffs, losing in the NFC wildcard round to the eventual. I guess that's the saving grace. You did lose to the eventual Super Bowl champion, Philadelphia Eagles, in the NFC wildcard game, 22-10 last year, but still a very disappointing. I remember that game. They were hanging, and they just couldn't, get over. They couldn't put a drive together when they needed it. And then, they couldn't get the stop late in the game when they needed it, and a disappointing end of the season overall. We're going to let Philip have the floor first on this one. It's his team. Phil, what do you think here for the Green Bay Packers?
Yeah, you know what? I think Jordan Love, I know last year we were saying this about him. It's a big season for him, but especially for Jordan Love this year. And I know last year he had that injury that kind of derailed him a little bit for the season. And we're recording this after week 1, and I saw that he had a thumb surgery on his non-throwing hand. So we'll see, how he responds to that, and if he can play a clean game in game 2, and if he plays. I'm not really sure if he is, but once again, I just I'm a little concerned about just the discipline and execution of this team at this point. LaFleur, I think last year he just did such a good job scheming things up, and they do all that spinner action with Josh Jacobs, and they have a fun running game to watch, really. So I think that this is going to be a team again that really relies on Josh Jacobs and the run game. Now, I'm really, really, really excited to see Matthew Golden and see if this guy can really emerge as wide receiver 1 for this offense, because this is something that the Packers have been missing for the last few years. And the fact that they went ahead and drafted a receiver in the first round, I mean, geez, I fell out of my chair. We always pick something boring, the D lineman, somebody on the defense, whatever. But I think that our team, we definitely address the fact that we need a weapon. We need a weapon to help out Jordan Love. And I think that, Love is a guy that he has those flashes, those unbelievable Aaron Rodgers-esque plays But once again, I'm just looking for him to eliminate some of those turnovers this year. I think that that's a big thing. Last year, sometimes you saw him force the ball in the places that didn't need to be. And he's a streaky guy too. When he gets hot, he gets hot, and so that's great. But let's show a little bit more consistency on the offense, and try to tighten things up there. Tucker Kraft, another great weapon. I think that he's just going to continue to keep growing. He led the league in yards per catch and avoided the tackle rate and everything. So he's a really good tight end that we have here. I think at the end of the day, though, this offense has a lot of potential, but I'm just looking for execution from them. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, I think a big weakness, and it's kind of a scary one to talk about, is the cornerbacks. Obviously the loss of Jair Alexander is kind of big, although I was kind of getting sick of that guy just not playing and his attitude. So I'm not too concerned about him. I think it was time to move on. But the secondary, that's kind of a little bit of a shaky thing for me here. So I think that, the secondary is going to be kind of a question mark here, and we'll kind of see exactly how everything moves forward with them on the defensive side of the ball. So
let me just throw it out there: 7 games in the last 2 seasons combined from Jair Alexander. The best ability is availability, and he was not available nearly enough.
Right. And you know what? The bright side on this defense, though, is Xavier McKinney. I mean, wow, what a perfect fit in Jeff Hafley's defense. He went out and 8 interceptions, ranked second in the NFL. So I think that he's going to be another huge player for us this year. That guy, I mean, he exceeded all expectations last year. I knew he was a great player. I just wasn't expecting him to be that good and such a ball hawk. I mean, that guy was unbelievable to watch. So, the secondary, they have a shot here, but I'm really curious to see, how we progress, from year one with Jeff Hafley, to see exactly, where this defense goes. Special teams wise, I mean, geez, that first preseason game, the muff punts. I mean, geez, who was muffing those again? McCole Hardman. I don't think that guy's going to make the team. He should not. That guy has had so many.
He was one of their wide receiver off-season additions too, and now right.
I mean, right away when I saw the roster, I was like, okay. I mean, he's kind of a name, and he's an interesting guy, but we'll see. We have enough of in that receiver room. I mean, I don't really know if there's a place for him, and especially, I mean, the way that he played in that week 1 preseason game. But you know what? I'm not going to hit the panic button quite yet. What's the Packers total this year?
The Packers win total in the division is, let me just get the updated number here. It was in that same, 9.5 type of, 9.5. Pretty much even money. Over 9.5 plus 100, under 9.5 minus 120.
Geez, let's look at the Packers schedule real quick, because I think, I mean, that's a really good, that's a good number. I'm really concerned, man. I'm really concerned about this team for some reason. I don't know. I just have a gut feeling on these guys, but Commanders, tough game, Bengals, Steelers, then they kind of have a break there. Cardinals, Panthers, Giants.
It's a mix. They've got some tough out of the NFC North division games that like you mentioned Ravens, Steelers, Eagles, but they also have teams like the Browns, the Giants, Panthers on their schedule.
Yeah. Well, and then, last year, the other concerning thing about the 2024 season, 2024, 2025 is, what they won 1 game in the division, right? They went 1-5. Is that right?
I believe so. Yep.
So I mean, geez, you got to protect the division too. I mean, they obviously had a great record, but you got to win some of those games. You got to steal one against the Vikings. You got to steal one against the Lions, and you have to own the Bears like Rodgers did. But I think a lot of this win total for me is going to come down to the division. And let's just freaking hope it doesn't get worse than it did last year. That's all I'm going to say. But you know what? I think that this is a 10-win max team. That's what I'm going to say. 10-win max. So honestly, I'm almost leaning.
I'm leaning under. I'll be honest. I'm leaning. I haven't bet it yet, and I had a neutral opinion on Green Bay entering training camp and preseason.
Yeah,
and I don't love it.
And you know what? I think we'll get to the Vikings here, but Man, I'm telling you what, with me just saying that I think they're a 10 win a 10 win maximum team, I think I would lean under too.
Yeah. Especially, and look, you were the one to voice the concern about some of the bad habits you're starting to see here in preseason as well. I'm a little bit more pessimistic than optimistic, but there's also a part of me that knows that Jordan Love at his best is really damn good. But I
Yeah,
don't always, like you said, streaky is the right word. He can
right.
go 2-3 drives in a row, bing, bang, boom, down the field, touchdown. And then they bog down and they go, 2 quarters without barely moving the football and nothing but 3 and out. So it is a bit of a mixed bag with Jordan Love. We'll see if it can get any better. Look, they were starting to get red hot there, late in the year last year, November, December. And it looked like they had the team to maybe get on a run in the playoffs. But then, of course, you had the Christian Watson ACL injury last year. That really hurt, and of course limited their. And the receiving core needs to step up a bit too. Romeo Dobbs got to stay healthy. I like Jaden Reed. I don't think Dontavian Wicks was nearly as consistent as I would have liked last year for that Green Bay receiving core. Can Watson stay healthy? They did address the receiving core with Matthew Golden. Nice pick. But again, we will see if he has got what it takes as a first-round pick. He does have great speed. That they need that. They need more speed at the wide receiver spot, Green Bay, and they are hoping Matthew Golden can address that for them, no doubt. What are you going to get this year from Josh Jacobs? Not getting any younger, but at the same point in time, he's a good all-purpose running back because he can catch the ball too out of the backfield. The offensive line, for the Green Bay Packers, we'll have to see how it goes. But, Rasheed Walker, Zach Tom, the tackles are not bad. They're in solid positions there. But again, the interior of that O-line, is kind of meandering, if you will. They're going to have a position change for Elgton Jenkins. He's going to try go to center this year. We'll see how that goes because Josh Myers is no longer the center there. It's Aaron Banks is likely going to be taking Jenkins' spot. Jenkins going from guard to center, and it looks like it's going to be Aaron Banks taking the guard spot there. So there's questions along that O-line. They're going to have to hope Jordan Morgan as well is ready to get a little better this year. Remember, they drafted him first round, 2024, to help that offensive line out as well. So there's questions galore there. Defensive side of the football, obviously, look, they drafted Golden, but I don't think they were as aggressive on. It's almost like they think, Philip, that they've got a great defense. They had a middle-of-the-pack defense last year, in my opinion. And the one thing that I think, it showed up the pass rush against some of the weaker offenses and weaker teams, but that pass rush, I didn't see it enough against, when they got up against Jalen Hurts and the Eagles and some of the other good offenses. That's when we didn't see much pass rush from this Green Bay Packers team. I think they could have made an upgrade as far as the edge rush position is concerned, especially with how that defense struggled a lot more against the better offenses on their schedule. Rashawn Gary, solid season last year, really good season. But after that, I think they were hoping Lucas Van Ness was going to be pretty good in the pass rush, and he didn't really have the season people thought. And that's a guy that's been a first-round pick of theirs that just has not panned out. And he only had 3 sacks all of last year. That's very disappointing for a guy that, was drafted out of the first round by this Green Bay team. They did draft in the 4th round Baron Sorrell to try to, help this pass rush. But again, 4th round pick, it's always a little bit of a risk, if you will, to see what they're going to translate into. Kenny Clark's another guy, man. Very disappointing. He's 30 years old now. It looks like he's just been in steady decline. This guy started out his career as like, wow, he's going to be a dominant defensive tackle for years in this league, and he's really not matched that first year ever since. So you're going to need him to be a little bit better as well for this Green Bay team. You look at the secondary, you mentioned it. I think it was time to he's talented, but he's also a bit of a malcontent, Jair Alexander, and he never stays healthy. 7 games in the last 2 years combined. I don't mind them saying adios to him. I do like that they brought in Nate Hobbs. I think that was a really nice addition to this secondary by Green Bay. Really, really good player. He certainly is going to help that pass defense, no question about it. You mentioned how good Xavier McKinney is patrolling the middle of the field. He's absolutely one of the better safeties in the National Football League, and he'll be really solid once again for this group, no question. And like I said, they added Hobbs. That's good. It's going to be interesting to see Edgerrin Cooper. very, very good last year for them. And that was in his rookie season. So great dividends for a guy they drafted in the second round as well. So he was good when you look at it for this Green Bay defense as well. Very, very good considering, it's a second round pick playing in his first season. He played very well. And of course, also they've got Quay Walker also as in the linebacking core. We'll see if he can contribute in a positive light. Kind of a up and down season for him it was last year. But what concerns me in a league where all I hear from the experts, and I kind of agree with it, sometimes I don't agree with the experts. Sometimes I like fading the experts. But in this case where they say this in today's day and age, when the quarterback is such a big deciding factor in winning games, you got to have a pass rush to get after him. And I just don't know if Green Bay did enough in the pass rush department, to improve their pressure rate, because their pressure rate was right smack dab middle of the pack in the NFL last year.
Mm-hmm.
And if it stays that way, which I think, and I don't think it's going to get much better, but if it stays that way, and it could even decline, I don't like teams that are bottom half of the league in pressure on the opposing quarterbacks. And that's definitely one of the biggest concerns I have for the Green Bay Packers this year on defense. So I'm kind of with you. I'm a little bit pessimistic, especially in a division where we do expect Detroit to fall off a little bit, but they're still going to be really good. Chicago's better. Minnesota, we'll get to in a second, I think could be really good. So Green Bay's got their hands full, Phil. I lean under 9.5 as well.
Yeah.
All right, there you go. Minnesota Vikings now, the last team in the NFC North preview. So there's a lot of concern about, obviously, J.J. McCarthy, right? He's coming off an injury that ended his season in August last year. He got injured in a preseason game, and then all of a sudden his season is over. We didn't even get to see him in a regular season game. So this is essentially his rookie year in redo mode for him. And all I have to go on to base that J.J. McCarthy, and my belief in him, is his head coach, Kevin O'Connell, because I trust Kevin O'Connell to work great with quarterbacks. All you have to do is look at what he got out of Sam Darnold last year. Insanity that Sam Darnold played that well. Now, he kind of turned into a fucking pumpkin there at the end with the Detroit game in the final game of the regular season, and the disastrous playoff game against the LA Rams. But we certainly didn't think he would have that array of great, consistent, strong regular season that he had. And I think Kevin O'Connell should be thanked for that. He played a big role in that. He just works very well with quarterbacks. And that's why I'm believing that he can work well here with J.J. McCarthy for the Minnesota Vikings. So it's his team now. It's J.J. McCarthy's team. Again, this is more of me buying into O'Connell and his ability to work with quarterbacks. And he was coached up well. He's a great offensive-minded head coach. We know that. No question about that. And when you look at Darnold, he also had a great receiving core, and McCarthy's going to have a great receiving core here with the Vikings. Now, they do have a Jordan Addison injury here in training camp, so you don't like to hear that. And Justin Jefferson's been banged up a little bit, but when they're fully healthy, that's as good as it gets 1-2 punch-wise at receiver. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison for Minnesota. There's no doubt. Jalen Naylor, he might be able to come along and be good. A good tight end, and T.J. Hawkinson, once again, back this year for the Minnesota Vikings. So the weapons are there. At running back, you've got the former Packer, Aaron Jones, of course, running the football for this Minnesota team. So the skill position talent is there. And the offensive line should be there too, because with this offensive line, well, I think they've got more depth this year, the offensive line. Christian Darrisaw last year, he suffered another injury, season ender, middle of the year, and he got injured the year before too. But that offensive line came and went as Christian Darrisaw came and went. When he was in there, it was a really good offensive line. When he was out, it wasn't even close. But he's healthy now, and the great thing, and they did acquire Cam Robinson. I think they expected more from him when they got him middle of last year. But the good news is Darrisaw's healthy. You got to hope Robinson can play better. And look, Brian O'Neill, the other tackle, is excellent. So there should be not many issues. As long as Darrisaw stays healthy, there should not be many issues with the tackle position for Minnesota. They should be very good there. And the interior of the offensive line. Last year, that was the weakness. That was the issue. But they signed Ryan Kelly, Will Freeze, both of them from the Indianapolis Colts. And they also drafted a first-round pick in Donovan Jackson to help that offensive line. So that offensive line on paper, to me, it's like Chicago's. It's much better on paper, no doubt. Now they got to go out and perform and show that cohesion. But I do think they're a lot better offensive line on paper. The defensive side of the football, the defense was the issue for a large part of the problems. They had their share of issues at times. Brian Flores, there was improvement. They got from bottom tier defense to middle of the pack as far as yardage and points allowed. But still, in some of the bigger games, there were still some issues at times. But it was a nice jump, certainly, for the Minnesota Vikings defense last year. Brian Flores certainly did help it. There's no question. There was still a solid, strong improvement last year. Obviously, they struggled against the Rams and McVay, but the Rams and Matt Stafford and Sean McVay, pretty damn good offense, pretty good brain power there on offense too. So not shocking that maybe Brian Flores' defense had a little bit of more difficulties. And they blitzed too much, blitz heavy, and sometimes that exposed their secondary last year, Phil. We know Flores loves to dial up the pressure and the blitz packages. We know that. But it's almost like they did it too much, at times last year. So maybe he relents on that a little bit. And maybe he's got a little bit more faith in the secondary. And he should, because I think it's a better secondary. Maybe because he's got a stronger secondary this year, Philip, he's going to relent a little bit on how many times he dials up the blitz and the pressure, because the secondary should be improved. Isaiah Rodgers was brought in, and he's a guy that should shore this unit up quite a bit. They also suffered. Mekhi Blackman had an injury last year, and he lost for almost the entire season last year. So, like I said, having him back and healthy should help as well. Byron Murphy as well, on this secondary, coming off a great year last year. Harrison Smith, he's getting a little older now, but I think he's still a pretty serviceable, solid, steady safety for this team, helping them in that regard. They've got their linebackers. Blake Cashman was very good last year. Ivan Pace Jr. Like I said, I think that secondary is significantly upgraded, no question. And when you look at the defensive line going into this year, Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, I think those two D linemen adds should be really solid. I think Jonathan Allen still has gas in the tank. Flores will get a lot of production out of him. Javon Hargrave, same thing. Harrison Phillips, it's still the nose tackle for this team. The pass rushing production, should be pretty solid. Andrew Van Ginkel, as I like to call him there. Jonathan Grenard as well, very solid pass rusher. Dallas Turner was drafted first round last year, kind of struggled, but he can certainly help along that defensive front as well. I think it's a pretty good defense this year. I think you could make a damn good case. This may be Minnesota's best defense the last 3-4 years, certainly since Kevin O'Connell's been here as the head coach. So I like this Minnesota team, Phil. I'm going to trust the coaching staff. I'm going to trust he can get a good year out of McCarthy, even though it's his first year as an NFL starting quarterback. And like I said, this is a team that last year with Sam Darnold won all the games that they did, right? Last year, 14-3 with Sam fucking Darnold, right? And a defense that I think last year was not quite as good as the defense they'll put on the field this year. So you put all that together, and I'm going to buy into the Minnesota Vikings being certainly a better team than what their win total is. I mean, we're talking 8.5 at -145 with their win total. We're only asking Minnesota to be 9-8, for goodness sake. I think that's easily doable in this division because I believe in the McCarthy and O'Connell pairing on offense. We've got a great receiving core, Jones running it, a better offensive line, a better defense, coaching staff we trust. Now, the schedule, like with many of the teams in this division, it's not easy for the Minnesota Vikings from a scheduling standpoint here. They have to play the Eagles, Ravens, Steelers, Commanders. However, they do have some softer games on their schedule. Dallas, New York Giants, Seattle's winnable, Cleveland's no good. So they do have some winnable games on their schedule, but it's my favorite win total in the division. I'll just say it right now. Minnesota Vikings over 8.5. Phil, what do you think here, Minnesota Vikings?
Look, great rundown on the roster, and I'll cut to the chase here. I think that this is potentially a Super Bowl roster. I mean, this is a great team. I mean, and really the X factor here, like we talked about before the show, is JJ McCarthy. And I will say this, I wasn't super high on him coming out of college, really being a Michigan hand the ball off guy in the
Neither
Big
was
Ten.
I. And I'll say this: it's now I'm higher on him because I think he's working with a guy that's going to
Well,
get the
and
most out of him, like he did with Darnold last year.
And exactly, and that's exactly what I'm putting my chips on is Kevin O'Connell. That guy is a quarterback guru. He knows how to call games. I saw some clips last year where literally, in the helmet, in the radio, I mean, he's saying, look for the crosser, Sam. And sure enough, it's freaking there. So, Kevin O'Connell, that's where I'm truly putting my faith here. And I don't think JJ McCarthy needs to do anything insane, especially when you're throwing to Justin Jefferson. This offensive line has drastically improved, in my opinion. They have some depth now. The additions that you mentioned, obviously they're not going to have Addison for what, 3 games? Is it 3 or is it 6? It's just 3.
It's looking
right?
like about a month that he'll miss.
Okay,
Yeah.
so 3 games of suspension. Jalen Naylor's obviously a great receiver too. So I don't have any concerns really on the offensive side other than the question mark that is JJ McCarthy. Now, once again, preseason rumblings, and I grew up in Minnesota as well, actually, so all my friends are there, and we give each other shit before the season, and I've seen
There's got to be some real good shit talking Packers and Vikings fans with you and those fellas, right? Yeah.
And the one thing that's funny is I saw that the Vikings, or I think the Vikings are the first team to have a bunch of male cheerleaders on their team, so we gave them crap about that. But no,
look, I'm all about inclusion and equality and all that shit. Keep the cheerleaders to females, please. Can we at least do that? That's what we grew up with.
Right.
That's just
well, and so I mean, offensively, I mean, Aaron Jones, he kind of had a little bit of a fumble bug there, but he's still explosive. TJ Hawkinson, obviously with the injury and everything last year, hopefully he's healthier this year. Defensively, I love the Jonathan Allen addition. I love freaking who's the DC again? God, you said his name. I'm blanking now.
Brian Flores.
I mean,
the only thing I think he gets too blitz happy sometimes. But now maybe if he trusts his secondary, he trusts his defensive backs, which he should a little bit more because I think they're better. Maybe he'll dial it down a little bit.
Well, and that's the thing with him is it's kind of just it's his DNA.
Like big third down and long, 5 minutes to go in the game.
Right.
You're up by a possession. You're trying to hold. Then you bring the heat. But you don't have to do it. 0-0, second and 10, 2 minutes left in the first quarter. I don't need to see you bringing an all-out blitz. You know what I mean?
And that's situational football at its finest, because you know what he does, and I mean, I've seen, I think it was Joe Burrow after a game last year. I mean, or I don't know if they played the Bengals, but I know that there was a prominent quarterback that went up to Flores, or it was Purdy who went up to Flores and said, "Preparing for your defense gives me nightmares." Like that guy. I mean, and that's the one thing that he does so well, and I can appreciate this as a quarterback is when you can diagnose what's gonna happen before the snap, it's a lot easier. But with him, he's all over the place. I mean, he disguises so well, and that's also why I think Harrison Smith is hanging on to this roster for so long. That guy is a disguise genius. So I think the additions that they made defensively too. I mean, I think that this defense is going to make an improvement as well. 8.5. I mean, geez, I'm not a huge bettor, but I'm going to get right when we get off this. I'm going to go ahead and put 200 on that, because 8.5. I think this team will for sure win 8.5, and I actually have them pegged to potentially win the North, pending JJ McCarthy. Obviously, that's the one thing that we're all wondering. And honestly, Ian, looking at this schedule, I think it's, obviously they have a few tough games in there, but, Bears, Falcons, Bengals are winnable. Steelers, Browns. I mean,
Giants, Cowboys, Browns, Seahawks. They can win.
Beginning of this schedule, I mean, I could see the Vikings winning their first 4 games, 5 games, easy. Well, not easy, but I could see them winning their first 5 games. And that's 5 right there. So, then you sprinkle the Packers. I mean, I think they're going to at least get 1 out of the Packers. Seahawks, I think they beat. I mean, I really like this team, and I think that in terms of the whole, do you think JJ McCarthy's going to do well? I'm placing my bet on Kevin O'Connell, and you know what? Sometimes it's really good for a rookie to sit back a year and watch how the things work. So I really think that might have been a blessing in disguise for him. So You know what? 8.5 over for me, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Vikings win the North.
It's like you read my emails that I sent you about the NFL season win totals and future. I know I sent it to you, so maybe you did, but I am on Minnesota to win the NFC North. I did take a flyer. I did. 100% I did. I think it was worth it at plus 700. I think it was worth that price without question for them to win the NFC North, because we do see Detroit taking a little step back. We see this being a much more competitive division, Chicago, Minnesota, and Green Bay. And like I said, I think Minnesota was the value, or not 700, sorry, plus 350 they were to win the NFC North. They were plus 1,400 to win the NFC. And yes, I dabbled in the Super Bowl at 28-1 for the Minnesota Vikings. I think they can push for that. I really do. And was there another one that I was looking at as far as MVP? Did I take? Yeah, McCarthy, 75-1. Wow. I know that's very unlikely, but 70. I'm just saying. I think it's
he wins
a better
MVP.
Chance
they
of
win
it happening
the
than 75-1. Yeah.
Yeah. He wins MVP. They win the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Yeah. Damn good chance of that. So yeah, those are the. As you can tell, bullish on Minnesota. Oh yeah, comeback player of the year, and he's in this market because of the injury last year.
Okay.
So they're considering him a comeback player because of the season-ending injury. So 10-1, JJ McCarthy, comeback player of the year.
Fair
as well. So there you go. We got a lot of Minnesota Vikings investments here this season as far as the NFL season win totals and futures betting portfolio is concerned. There you have it. That's the NFC North. Great stuff as always with Philip Nelson. We'll wrap it up with best bets from the NFC North division. Philip, we'll start with you. Best bet for the NFC North. What are you going with?
I have a feeling I'm taking yours, but I'm going to stick on the Vikings here. 8.5, no brainer. No brainer for me. 8.5, more than that. And then in terms of just good odds, I would take them to win the North. So, those two for me, I'm high on the Vikings just as you are. But then I saw one other interesting one I'm just going to throw in here, knowing who Ben Johnson is and what he does with the run game and this improved Chicago offensive line. I like DeAndre Swift over 850.5 rushing yards for minus 114. I think that this is going to be a team that runs the ball in order to help Caleb Williams. And the only other running back that to top 5.5 yards per carry in Ben Johnson's offense is Jahmyr Gibbs, and Swift did that with them. So I expect the Bears to run the ball a little bit this year to take some pressure off. So I think that's another good one. So I mean, those three for me are some best bets.
You know what? That is an excellent point about DeAndre Swift, and he wants to be balanced. Ben Johnson never wants to be a pass-heavy offense. He wants balance. He wants run and pass. And that's a great point about DeAndre Swift. He has that connection with Ben Johnson from the Detroit days. So he knows what's coming here. Because remember, DeAndre Swift started his career with the Lions there. So that makes a lot of sense. I like that. So there you go. DeAndre Swift over rushing yards. What was that, 850?
850.5, yeah.
There you go. I like it. That's a good one. So there you go. Philip Nelson and Minnesota Vikings over 8.5 wins. My best bet is that Minnesota Vikings over 8.5 wins. Minus 140 currently at FanDuel. I think it's dirt cheap. All we're asking them is to be above 500 team, 9-8 or better, for a team that won, all the games they did last year with Sam Darnold. They were 14-3 last year with Sam Darnold. We can certainly get to 9-8 this year with what I think is an overall better roster than last year. So Minnesota Vikings over 8.5 wins for my NFC North best bet. Great stuff, Philip. Anything you want to add before we shut her down?
No, I think great show once again. This is going to be a very interesting division. Going to be a tough one. Obviously, I'm not a biased guy. I can see through some of these Packers holes here, the Swiss cheese holes. But well
done.
I like I really like the Vikings. I like their schedule. Other than the AFC West, man, I think that this is a very tough division, and I expect the Vikings to be competitive. And I think we're going to see some really good games in the division, especially late in December when it's cold and everyone's duking it out. So I think this is going to be a very fun division to watch.
Yeah, I agree. Top to bottom, it's there with the AFC West as probably going into this season, to me, those are the deepest divisions. Those are the best divisions, top to bottom, in the NFL. So excited to see for sure how it plays out. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. Hit the like button on the way out. This is not the last you've seen of Philip. He'll be back for a few more division previews here in the next few weeks. For Philip Nelson, I'm Ian Cameron. This has been your NFC North Division Season Preview edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.